Awakened to life out of the night of unconsciousness, the will finds itself as an individual in an endless and boundless world among innumerable individuals, all striving, suffering, and erring. And, as if through a troubled dream, it hurries back to the old unconsciousness. That's Arthur Schopenhauer, setting a tone for his philosophy. Unlike almost any other thinker in history, he wasn't interested in pleasantries or sugarcoating reality. His mission was to understand the world, not to make us feel good about it. And for Schopenhauer, understanding the world meant confronting a stark, often uncomfortable truth. The very act of living the fundamental impulse that propels us forward is the source of our deepest suffering. Welcome back to The Will to Wisdom. Today, we're diving into one of Schopenhauer's most central and perhaps most challenging ideas, the affirmation of the will to live, and how, in his view, this affirmation is inextricably linked to suffering. We often think of life as a gift, something given to us, filled with potential for happiness and fulfillment. We are told to pursue our dreams, to strive for success, to find joy and pleasure. This is what most of us instinctively do, isn't it? We affirm life, we embrace it, we chase its promises. But what if, as Schopenhauer suggests, this affirmation isn't a path to happiness, but rather the very engine of our misery? Imagine for a moment the infamous Bagny of Toulon, brutal penal colony in the south of France, where prisoners were shackled, malnourished, and condemned to forced labor. Schopenhauer himself visited such a place as a young man, and the experience profoundly affected him. He described the conditions as far more terrible than a death sentence. What struck him wasn't just the proximity of death, but the sheer, relentless suffering of life itself. It felt like a grim, inescapable task of drudgery to be worked through. This wasn't just a fleeting observation. For Schopenhauer, this became a powerful metaphor for human existence itself. Life, for most people, is characterized by universal need, restless exertion, constant pressure, endless strife, forced activity. We are like prisoners, shackled to the relentless demands of living, constantly striving just for the bare maintenance of this very existence, extorted daily with unremitting effort and constant care. This isn't a pleasant picture, I know. But to understand Schopenhauer, we must first understand his view of what underlies reality itself. The world behind the curtain, will and representation. To grasp Schopenhauer's argument about suffering, we first need a quick overview of his major philosophical work, The World as Will and Representation. Schopenhauer saw reality as having two fundamental aspects. First, there's the world as representation. This is the world as it appears to us, filtered through the structure of our own minds, through space, time, and causality. It's the world of objects, phenomena, and our understanding of them. It's the world science describes, the world our senses perceive. It's the world for us. But for Schopenhauer, this is only part of the story. Behind this world of appearances is the world as will. This is the thing in itself, the underlying essence of reality that exists independently of our perception. The will, in Schopenhauer's philosophy, is not like a conscious mind or a divine being or some benevolent force. It is a blind, irrational, purposeless, striving energy. It is simply the impulsion to exist. It is agency without an agenda force that simply wills. It is the kernel of every individual thing and likewise of the whole. Schopenhauer argues that everything in the universe, from the force of gravity pulling stones to the earth, to the complex behavior of animals, to the deliberate actions of humans, are all just different appearances or objectifications of this single underlying will. They differ only in the degree of their manifestation, not in their fundamental essence. The will to live, our fundamental essence. When this blind, purposeless will manifests in conscious beings, particularly in humans, it takes the form of what Schopenhauer calls the will to live, Will zum Leben. This is our intrinsic core, our deepest nature. It's not just a rational decision to stay alive. It's a fundamental, often unconscious drive. The will to live is more than just the instinct for individual survival. Crucially, it also includes the drive for propagation, the impulse to reproduce and perpetuate the species. For Schopenhauer, this instinct is so powerful because it reflects the will's primary interest, the continuation of the species, which is the manifestation of the will on a higher, more enduring level than the transient individual. So, the will to live is this relentless inner motor that propels us forward. It's the source of our desires, our needs, our aspirations, our actions. It is, in essence, what we are. Affirmation. Embracing the relentless drive. The affirmation of the will to live is simply living in accordance with this fundamental drive. It's the state of constant willing and striving. It's pursuing our needs and desires, consciously or unconsciously, as dictated by this inherent impulse. Most people, most of the time, are in a state of affirming the will to live. It feels natural. We want things, we chase them, we try to get them, we react to the world based on our needs and desires. Our bodies themselves are the physical manifestation, the objectification of this affirming will. Our actions are simply the paraphrase, the explanation of the meaning of the body's inherent will. Even when we gain knowledge, even when we understand the world better, the will often remains undisturbed. We continue to will and strive just as we did before. The goals might change, the strategies might become more complex due to our intellect, but the fundamental act of willing the pursuit of ends driven by lack persists. The root of suffering. Why affirmation hurts. Now we get to the heart of Schopenhauer's pessimistic view. Why does affirming this fundamental drive to exist, this will to live inevitably, lead to suffering? Schopenhauer presents several interconnected reasons, forming a powerful, albeit bleak, argument. First, willing is suffering. At its core, every act of willing, every desire, every need originates from a state of lack, from something that is felt as missing. To desire is to feel a deficiency, and this feeling is suffering. Second, satisfaction is fleeting and negative. When we finally achieve what we desired, when a need is met, does it bring lasting happiness? According to Schopenhauer, no. Satisfying a desire merely temporarily removes the pain or lack that drove it. It's a negative state, the absence of pain, not a positive state of lasting joy. And the moment one desire is satisfied, Others flood in almost immediately to plague us with their non-satisfaction. Life becomes an endless cycle. Desire born of lack, temporary satisfaction, removal of pain, new desire born of new lack. We never reach a lasting satisfaction, says Schopenhauer. There is no such thing in the life of a willing being. Third, the torment of boredom. What happens if, for a rare moment, all our immediate desires are satisfied? We aren't met with blissful peace. Instead, we are tormented by boredom. This highlights the fundamental restlessness of the will. It must strive. It must be active. If it lacks external goals, it becomes a burden to itself. So, life driven by the will to live oscillates endlessly between the pain of unmet desires and the boredom of fulfilled ones. So, human life is bound to be a strenuous but ultimately empty game, he concludes, dispositionally incapable of true happiness, essentially a multifaceted suffering and a thoroughly disastrous condition. All life is suffering. Fourth, the illusion of happiness. We are born, Schopenhauer suggests, with the naive expectation of finding positive happiness and lasting pleasure in the world. This is like being born in Arcadia, a mythical land of bliss. But experience soon teaches us that this expectation is a chimera, deceptive illusion. Suffering and pain, unlike happiness, are real, manifesting immediately without needing hope or illusion. Voltaire was right, says Schopenhauer. Happiness is but a dream and pain is real. Our pursuit of this illusory, positive happiness, driven by the affirming will, often leads us directly into real, positive suffering. Fifth, the species versus the individual. The blind will's primary interest isn't your happiness or mine. It's the continuation and perfection of the species. Individuals are merely tool-transient manifestations serving this larger, unconscious purpose. The most potent expression of the will to live's affirmation is the sexual instinct, the drive to procreate. Schopenhauer argues that what we experience as romantic love is often just the species' will, using a powerful illusion to ensure a particular individual comes into existence. We believe we are pursuing our own infinite happiness with a particular person, but we are actually serving the species' goal. This is why, Schopenhauer notes, after the act of procreation or even after achieving the desired relationship, there is often a sense of profound disappointment or disillusionment. The illusion fades, having served its purpose for the species, leaving the individual to grapple with the reality of their life, which may now be complicated by the very relationship driven by the species' will. Sixth, internal conflict and struggle. The will is not a harmonious entity. It is a force in inner conflict with itself. It tears itself apart, says Schopenhauer. This is manifest throughout nature in the constant struggle for existence, one being dominating and destroying another. In humans, this conflict manifests as endless strife and exertion, both externally in our competition with others and internally as we wrestle with our own desires and limitations. Even when we succeed in overcoming external obstacles, the internal drive of the will remains, pushing us toward new struggles. Seventh, ignorance and self-deception. A significant part of our suffering comes from our lack of self-knowledge and our embrace of illusions. We strive for goals or lifestyles fundamentally unsuited to our individuality, leading to regret and discontent. We cling to the optimism that life is meant for enjoyment, when the reality for Schopenhauer is that it's meant for endurance. This ignorance fuels the futile chase after positive happiness. These are the layers of suffering that Schopenhauer sees as inherent to the affirmation of the will to live. It's a relentless, inescapable condition for most people. Let's explore this with some example stories that illuminate these abstract ideas. Stories of striving and suffering. Remember our starting point, the Bagne of Toulon? That image isn't just a metaphor for hard work, it's a metaphor for a life where effort is constantly demanded, but true fulfillment is never achieved. Think about it. The prisoners affirmed their lives in the most basic sense. They continued to exist. They performed the labor demanded of them. But this affirmation was pure suffering. They were shackled, not just physically, but by the brute fact of their existence within that system. For Schopenhauer, this mirrors the human condition. We are shackled by the will to live itself, compelled to labor through life's demands, often with little reward beyond mere survival. We perform the corvée of existencia debt incurred by the act of being born. The lesson here is that life compelled by the will, even when successful in its striving for momentary satisfaction, feels like forced labor because the underlying engine, the will, is blind, and the destination, lasting happiness, is illusory. Another potent image Schopenhauer uses comes from an observation by Tischbein of an Italian ass with a bundle of hay tied just in front of its nose. The ass, seeing the hay, constantly moves forward always, almost reaching its goal, but never quite getting there. This is a perfect illustration of the will to live in action, especially when focused on external goals or future happiness. We are driven by the hope of reaching the hazy illusion of positive satisfaction just ahead. We spend our lives running impatiently to meet future things, as if they alone could bring true happiness, letting the present pass by unenjoyed. We live ad interim, as Schopenhauer puts it, always waiting for the real life to begin until we die. The lesson here is about the futility of chasing a constantly receding future happiness. The affirmation of the will, when directed outward toward endless goals, creates a perpetual state of yearning that can never be fully satisfied, like the ass forever chasing the hay. Consider the stark example of the male beef drone. His entire existence is seemingly devoted to one purpose: fertilizing the queen. He strives, he fights, he survives, just long enough for this singular act. And after it is accomplished, he dies. Nature is ruthless. She doesn't care about the drone's individual hopes or dreams, his personal well-being, or whether he finds fulfillment. He is a tool, sacrificed for the continuation of the species. Schopenhauer sees this mirrored in human life, especially in the overwhelming power of the sexual instinct. We too are compelled by this drive, often against our better judgment, sacrificing our happiness, fortune, or even safety, all to serve the species' need for new individuals. The lesson from the drone is that the will to live's affirmation prioritizes the species over the individual in the most brutal way. Our personal striving is often just a means to an end that is not our own, leading to suffering when our individual interests clash with nature's relentless drive. Perhaps one of the most counterintuitive examples Schopenhauer uses relates to the act of procreation itself. Why is this act so fundamental to the continuation of life, almost universally accompanied by shame and secrecy. Schopenhauer argues that this isn't an arbitrary social custom or the result of religious dogma. It's a deep, intuitive, albeit unconscious, recognition that our very existence, brought about by this act, contains a fundamental fault or debt. We are, as Calderon put it, born guilty, and the act of generation is the manifestation of this guilt. Even people who are otherwise honest and virtuous feel a sense of uneasier, even horror, when reflecting coolly on this act. The lesson here is profound and unsettling. If life were the wonderful, praise-worthy gift that optimism claims it is, the act that perpetuates it should be celebrated openly, not hidden with shame. The fact that we instinctively feel this shame suggests that, at a fundamental level, our affirmation of the will to live embodied in this act is tied to a condition, existence, that is inherently flawed or undesirable. Finally, consider the countless stories of love marriages versus arranged or convenient marriages. Schopenhauer notes that marriages based purely on passionate love driven by that intense, instinctual illusion from the species will often end in unhappiness once the illusion fades. The very qualities that made two people seem like the perfect match for the species' purpose, producing a certain offspring, might make them fundamentally incompatible as individuals sharing a life. Marriages of convenience, while lacking romantic fervor, might paradoxically lead to more stable, less suffering lives for the individuals involved precisely because they weren't founded on the fleeting, species-driven illusion of passionate love. The lesson here reinforces the conflict between the species' interest, driven by the will's affirmation, and the individual's happiness. What serves the will to live may actively harm the individual who embodies it. Is there an alternative? A glimpse of negation. Given this bleak picture of the affirmation of the will to live as the root of suffering, is there any hope? Does Schopenhauer offer a way out of this relentless cycle? He does, but it's not an easy or conventional one. Schopenhauer introduces the concept of the negation or denial of the will to live. This is not the same as suicide, which he sees as an act of frustrated affirmation, destroying the appearance, the body, because the underlying will is too strong to endure life's restrictions. Instead, negation is a turning away from willing itself. It's a state where knowledge of the world's suffering and the futility of striving acts as a tranquilizer for the will. This state of negation involves a detachment from individual desires and the illusion of the separate self. It can arise from profound suffering or deep compassion, seeing the suffering in all beings as one's own. It leads to a state of voluntary renunciation, resignation, true composure, and complete willlessness. For Schopenhauer, this difficult, constantly re-earned state is the closest thing to salvation or redemption from the suffering inherent in the world. It is, paradoxically, his idea of the highest good. But exploring this path of negation is a topic for another time. It is a complex and often mystical aspect of Schopenhauer's philosophy that requires dedicated focus. Conclusion. So, where does this leave us? Schopenhauer presents a powerful, unsettling vision. He argues that our fundamental nature, the will to live, is a blind, purposeless force that drives us into an endless cycle of striving and suffering. Our affirmation of this will, our inherent impulse to exist and pursue satisfaction is the very root of our misery. Happiness, in the sense of lasting positive fulfillment, is an illusion. The will cares only for the species, using the individual as a disposable tool. It's a bleak diagnosis, I won't deny it. Schopenhauer's philosophy is, in many ways, a transcendental miserabilism, seeing the world through a lens of inherent suffering and futility. He even suggests that it might have been better if life had never arisen at all. But perhaps there is wisdom even in this pessimism. By unflinchingly revealing the mechanisms of the will and the illusions of affirmation, Schopenhauer offers us a crucial insight. Recognizing that our suffering is deeply rooted in the fundamental nature of willing, rather than merely in external circumstances, can change our perspective. It helps us understand the restlessness, the dissatisfaction, and the inevitable disappointments that punctuate our lives. It shifts our focus from chasing external sources of happiness, which the will uses as bait anyway, to understanding the internal engine that drives the chase. This understanding, painful as it might, buys the necessary first step toward finding a different relationship with that driving force. It's the crucial prerequisite for even contemplating the possibility of the negation of the will to live a path that seeks not happiness in the world, but liberation from the suffering inherent in willing. Schopenhauer's philosophy doesn't offer easy answers or feel-good platitudes. It offers a profound, challenging truth. The affirmation of the will to live is the root of suffering, but perhaps recognizing the root is the beginning of cultivating a different kind of garden. In our next video, we'll begin to explore the alternative, Schopenhauer's concept of the negation of the will to live, and what that might mean for finding peace in a world defined by suffering. Thank you for joining me on The Will to Wisdom. If you found this exploration valuable, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment below. Your engagement helps this wisdom reach others. Until next time, may your search for wisdom continue.